Hi everyone, hope you're all well. Okay, so just about 40 seconds before we get going. For anybody that is new to this session, this is the Monday assembly as our weekly group ride. For anyone that is new, my name's Rich. I'm the head coach and founder of RIAK Fitness. We're a coaching outfit, which you'd probably be glad of, because today in this session we're going to be talking about how to set up your own sort of basic training plan. Okay. A couple of more things for you to set up. Okay, here we go then. Last few seconds. Let's get ready then, guys. Here we are then. Off we go. So we're riding on RGT's real world course this evening, the Ronde, and that's in advance of the Tour of Flanders this weekend, which should be an absolute cracker. As far as I'm aware, all the big names are involved, so it should be, as I say, an absolute belter. So for those of you guys that are new to these sessions, there are various ways you can get in touch. We do like these sessions to be as interactive as possible. For the guys that are joining us on Zoom, you can unmute yourself and ask away. You can use the Zoom chat. You can use the RGT chat, or I do actually also have all the social media chats kind of coming into one place as well. So you can message us in the comments section on the live stream. So various different ways. Long story short, welcome your questions basically. So firstly, tonight's discussion, we'll be talking about how to put together a basic training plan, and I have to thank Mike for this one. He dropped me an email requesting we talk about this, and I think that's the first thing to say, guys, is that if there are any particular topics or discussions you'd like us to entertain, then do drop us an email, do message us on social media, what have you. We really want to make sure we're talking about the stuff that you care about, basically, because that means people will come back and, you know, we get to engage some more and keep the ball rolling. So do always feel free to make suggestions to us. Might not be able to incorporate it immediately like we have done tonight. I did have another session planned, but I thought this one actually would be more interesting. So we're going to be talking about how to put together a training plan, and just some basic kind of do's and don'ts. Now, this might sound like a crazy thing for a coaching outfit to do, to basically tell you how to do it yourself, but we're not going to be giving away the family china, don't worry. Well, actually, you want us to, so why would you be worried? Anyway, so just a quick reminder of how we do these sessions. Just rolling around to Ronde. You can either use these sessions as a active recovery ride and just poodle around, or you can go hard, or you can do like me and just roll around about 2 watts per kilo, trying to stay involved, but probably forgetting what you're doing because you're trying to do 2 things at once and just talking away. Anyway, so it's a nice discussion. As I say, these sessions are intended to be interactive, so just a starting point, if anyone's got any points that they particularly like me to cover when it comes to training plans, yeah, do feel free to put them in the chats and I'll make sure I cover them. Otherwise, we always have time for questions at the end, but do always feel free to interrupt. Right, get that out of the way. Let's keep drinking as well. Before we get stuck into did anyone watch the racing at the weekend, Ghent-Wevelgem? Yeah. Women's race was fantastic. Men's race, not so much. Bit of a snooze fest. In my opinion, anyway. I always think Ghent-Wevelgem's always a risk of being a snooze fest, though, because you've got such a flat, long, open road finish. Yeah, I don't know. Not my favourite race. Still great. Still feels an afternoon, doesn't it? But the women's sprint, if anyone's not watched it, I won't give away the results. But the women's sprint is pretty cool. But yeah, all building up to this weekend. Who's going to take it? I can't actually. I think all the big main players are racing it. I think Pogacar might be racing it as well. So I think it could go anywhere really. I think that's what's so exciting about it. Particularly if it's nice weather, it will be horrifically hard. They will ride. I know everyone likes rain when there's cobbles and stuff, but when it's sunny, you know, people are going to attack from anywhere. You know, like Van der Poel likes to do, sort of 80k's out or whatever. Absolutely love that. So yeah, looking forward to a good weekend. Anyway, so on to training plans. So setting up a training plan, guys, is actually super simple. So what we're hoping to do by the end of this chat is just kind of give you a better sense of how to perhaps just manage your week. Don't necessarily have to build sort of a structured plan as such, but hopefully just give you some ways that you can kind of look after your training a little bit more sensibly. So as I say, it's quite simple to set up really to get the basics right. But where it does get complicated is kind of things like individualizing the plan for both yourself as an athlete and also the goal that you're working towards. The two don't always go hand in hand. Time availability usually being the biggest limiter. You know, blending the training so that there's enough of a stimulus without there being too much intensity, which you need to then recover from. That's one of the things that I see athletes get wrong all the time when they're sort of self-coached. They think more is more. It's not, okay? We've talked on a number of occasions about the importance of blending your training so that it's well balanced. We're talking a little bit about that, but not going into tons and tons of detail on that because we've talked about that at length in other sessions. You know, there's other things that can complicate a training plan. Structuring it around your realistic time availability. Okay, so I think whenever you're putting together a training plan, that is the place to start. You literally get a chart and work out what you do over the course of the week and work out actually how much time you do have available to train. And then once you've done that, you have to then apportion a certain amount for living. Okay, so making sure that you leave a certain amount of time to kind of spend time with your family or not, depending whether you like them or not. You know, make them work for your affection a little bit, but also you know, just doing things that you find enjoyable outside of training. Whatever that could possibly be, I don't know. But you have to be super realistic in the amount of time you have available. Okay, so make sure that you're perhaps quite conservative with that, and that should be the first thing you do before kind of putting together your training plan. Yeah, how to blend the training so that you address the areas that you want to improve on, but without suffering in the other areas that perhaps you're already quite good at. How to prepare for a specific event. I think really that's kind of all this stuff is basically what a coach can do. I think that one really is kind of like the overwhelming aspect that a coach can help with. And then how to taper, that's a really tricky one. Super individual in terms of how to taper. I'm particularly strange. I'm not very good off a taper. And then also dealing with the psychological side of training. That's another thing that can really kind of complicate a training plan. Now, all of the things that I've just talked about, really, the areas that a coach can help with, and I will be talking about our coaching relationships at the end of the session. I can't miss an opportunity to plug our services. I'm sure you can all understand that. Those are kind of some of the areas. So if you think of putting together a basic training plan, you know, if you wanted to go beyond that, then it does start to get quite complicated, and that's where people like myself earn their money. But just on coaching, I mean, it is an investment, and let's face it, cycling and triathlon are expensive sports. In our opinion though, you're going to get a far greater benefit from commissioning a coach or commissioning a properly tailored training plan than if you buy that set of aero wheels. I know that's not what you want to hear. You want to pull the trigger on those new 80 mils, but yeah, you might get a minute over 40k, but what about 5-10 minutes with a proper training plan and a proper taper, etc, etc. And one thing to bear in mind when it comes to preparing yourself with a training plan, it comes down to how seriously you take it all, really, and how important your athletic goals are. And it's absolutely fine to be relaxed about them. Okay, I don't want anyone coming on this session thinking that we're saying the only way you're ever going to improve is you follow a really structured training plan and you get a coach and you spend money on that. Blah, blah. That's not what we're saying. Really, it's absolutely fine if you're quite relaxed about it. If you're just looking to stay fit, you know, have a bit of fun, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, you know, I respect people massively that can be that relaxed about it. I'm obviously incredibly anal about my training and I take it very seriously, but you don't have to. And it's important, I think, also before you advance on any form of training plan, whether it's with a coach or not, is you just kind of assess where it all sits in the hierarchy of your priorities. So, you know, other priorities being, you know, your family, work, social life, you know, sinking 8 points every Saturday night, whatever. And just making sure you know exactly where training and racing fits in that hierarchy, so that when push comes to shove, you know, you can make your decision and feel fine about it. Because what you often see is people haven't done that, and they get themselves into a bit of a tiz when, you know, work starts getting really busy, and, you know, and it is likely to impact on their race that they have coming up. Ultimately, if you're career driven and your job is really important to you, then that's your priority, and that's okay. That's absolutely fine. It's okay to have something else that's more important. And then likewise, you know, sometimes people aren't career driven. Perhaps their families are the most important thing in their lives, and, you know, arguably should be. But, you know, perhaps they like to, you know, they don't like training on a Saturday because that's family time or whatever. Again, all that's absolutely fine. But I do think before you start off creating a training plan, there's those two things I talked about. Firstly, working out your realistic time availability, and then also just making sure you know where it all sits in your hierarchy of priorities, so that when push comes to shove, you can make a nice quick decision. So hopefully that's all nice and clear. Just to go into some more basics of setting up a plan. I think the first thing is kind of going back to something we talked about previously, is making sure you got the right blend, the right ratio of high intensity to endurance training. Now, if you want more on that, because I'm not going to go into it now, make sure you watch the session that we did a few weeks back about the importance of low intensity training. Because in that we talk about the 80-20 theory, which basically means 80% of your training, your total volume should be around 80% of your total volume should roughly be low intensity, and then 20% of it high intensity. And that of course can change depending on the training phase, where you are on your plan, etc. Okay, but making sure you've got the right ratio of high intensity to low intensity training, that's always a very good kind of thing to keep double checking as you're going through building your plan. And then the other thing to check is that recovery is the basis around which the entire plan is built. Okay, so recovery, guys, we've all kind of heard the advice that recovery is when you improve. That's when your muscles grow. That's when your cardiovascular system develops, etc., etc. Okay, but if you haven't got enough recovery, built into your plan, that stuff can't happen. Okay, that stuff is going to be muted. You've got to allow yourself time to grow as an athlete and as a person, physically. All right, so I'll just spend a bit of time now talking about how we approach that. And it's important to say that our approach isn't the only approach, nor would we ever suggest it was. But the way we don't approach it is the traditional model of 3 to 4 weeks of loading, or sort of increasing volume and intensity, followed by 1 week of unloading or a rest week. We don't do it like that. As far as we can tell, can't really see any scientific underpinning for that approach. It seems to just be something that's born out tradition, something that's just kind of always been done. Well, actually, I know where it comes from, but I just can't mention where, because I don't want to be accused of slacking them off, because that's not what I'm trying to do. But yeah, we don't follow that traditional approach. In our view, recovery shouldn't be set in such an arbitrary way, because ultimately you need recovery when you need it. It's that simple. And so our approach really is to work in sort of 3 to 4 day cycles. So some form of recovery every 3 to 4 days, and that's quite flexible. So sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4, sometimes you'll go 5 days, but you know, it really comes down to the training phase, etc. And if you go beyond that, you have to accept that you have to kind of play catch up with the recovery. Okay, so the idea there really is to chip away at your fatigue so that hopefully you don't really need kind of full rest weeks. You'll need some weeks where you have a lower load to freshen up a bit and have a bit more of a mental break. But ultimately, what we're trying to achieve is that you don't forget what it feels like to feel fresh, because that's an easy kind of sensation to lose. And I think sometimes it's only when you have like a injury or a holiday or something, you're like, oh, maybe I was a little bit overly fatigued, and suddenly I feel amazing again. You don't want to forget that feeling. Okay, and that's kind of why we structure everything around regular recovery. So once you have that structure, once you have that 80-20 blend, and then also kind of you've planned out your recovery, only then would we suggest you start putting in sessions. And only then can you start to build what's called your macro plan, your overarching plan, your season plan, if you will. And as I say, this is kind of like your master plan, and I'll talk about that in a sec. Just take a moment, let's have a little look at where we are on RGT. Coming up towards the end of the lap. I think we finished on the Paterberg. Is it the Quermont and the Paterberg that we do in this, I think? Yeah, I think so. Just FYI guys, if you're into your beers, and we don't have any affiliation with them, this is just a preference, but Quermont beer, oh, that stuff is good. Nectar of the gods, that. Got a big thing for Belgian beers. Yeah, and you'll see their banners all over Tour of Flanders at the weekend. But yeah, they're based near the Quermont climb, and I think its average is 6.6%, and so is the alcohol content of the beer, which is a nice touch. Anyway, I should get money for that, but I won't. So yeah, coming up, here we are now, onto the Paterberg. Yeah, this is where usually Matt gives me some abuse for selling this as a low intensity ride and then putting in 2 big climbs. Sorry, just trying to make, what's that, sorry? Your silence is deafening, Matt. Just remember guys that if you do want an easier ride, you can always go to the sensor settings in RGT, and turn the trainer feedback, the trainer difficulty right down. That's what I've done. Somehow I'm still struggling to breathe. It's all a bit breathy this evening. I apologise for that. Just move my microphone slightly further away. But that's tonight's course. We've got 4 laps of this, so you might want to turn it down at some point. I don't know. So we talked about the basics. You know, we talked about making sure you work out your time availability for training, and that's realistic. We talked about what was the other thing we talked about? Yeah, we talked about the 80-20 rule, and making recovery, regular recovery, kind of the foundation of your plan. And now I'm just going to talk a little bit about macro plans. So that's something that you use to kind of glue your season together. You know, hopefully it involves the build towards a big event, a big challenge or a goal that you're trying to achieve. And a macro plan is just kind of like the high level view. So you're looking at months rather than weeks. And it's always a really good idea to do this. Because the main point here is to ensure you have a clear focus for the different training phases, the different phases of training. Whether that be kind of like an endurance focus or, you know, a high power focus. But just an example, in the off season, we had our triathletes working very hard on their short duration power and sprints, and that's not because we're trying to turn them into races, into bike races, but it's just because they would focus over the course of the season so much on kind of big endurance miles and sort of threshold type work, time trialing type work, that they can lose that top end power. And so we were just trying to bump that back up. So that's just an example of kind of something that you can build into kind of like your overarching plan. A time to work on your weaknesses before you start to get into the big build towards your event. Also, with your macro plan, you want to make sure you plan in any holidays or events so you can structure your training plan around them. And then another important feature is scheduling those key weeks. So this is something that we do, and we are, well, what's the expression? Rather firm on, without wishing to sound too authoritarian. We double down on this because it's really important for the athlete's confidence to have like a big kind of training week or couple of weeks relatively close to their event, where they have a high training volume, and that for those week or 2 weeks, training is their kind of priority, their real focus. So sometimes they might take a full week off work, or, you know, go on a training camp, or just, you know, block out time in their diary and just say to work, oh, we've got builders in or something like that. I don't know. There's all kinds of, I won't say what we advise them to do. But basically, making sure you've got key weeks in your plan just really helps you to feel prepared for your event. So for triathletes, it's those big brick sessions, or for one of our cyclists who's doing Tour of Cambridgeshire, you know, we've got him with a big 3-week block straight into a taper, getting ready for that, because that's a 100-mile road race. So he needs big base before he hits that. He's got all the power in the world, but he needs a big base. And he lives in Guernsey, so he's only got about 40 square miles of roads. So you kind of have to schedule that in, because spending sort of 4, 5, 6 hours running around Guernsey like I used to when I used to work over there, it's hard. It's just doing laps and laps. So that's your macro plan, guys. A few different elements there to make sure you cover off. But the main thing is to kind of make sure you have like a good kind of structure to your monthly focus. And then that will basically Yes, yeah, go on. Okay, so just for the live stream, the question was about how you would flesh that out. I think largely the question from Geth was about, you know, what platform and the practicalities of it. So yeah, we use Training Peaks, and shortly I'll show you kind of just an example of a 3 week plan. Yeah, we use Training Peaks. If you're doing your own plan on it, you'll need premium version of it, but I know coaches that use Excel spreadsheets. Nothing wrong with that, really. You know, there's various different ways that you can look after it. Training Peaks generally has a bit of a stranglehold on the market. There are other brands. I heard of one recently, which I now can't remember the name of, but there are other kind of platforms and pieces of software that you can use. So we can just do it manually. Like I say, I think when you're making that sort of decision, I think that's part of kind of working out what your priorities are. Because once you work out where your priorities sit, where training sits alongside, you know, work, family life, social life, all those other things, once you've done that, then you can start thinking about a level of investment, both in terms of time and money. And that's where you'll start considering, do I pay for, Training Peaks Premium, or, you know, because let's face it, we've all got subscriptions coming out of our ears. But yeah, so I think the reason we use Training Peaks is because it just really streamlines things. So for instance, it will auto sync with many of the different devices out there. Garmin's, Wahoo's, Sunto's, Polar, all those watches and bike computers. You can set them to auto sync, so it'll push all your data directly up to Training Peaks, so it all comes into one place, and you can just move things around a lot easier, and you can get some pretty good metrics on Training Peaks as well. So when we've been talking about aerobic decoupling and things like that, you know, you can get metrics to that on Training Peaks. So yeah, it's about bringing it all together, really. And that's kind of where the whole how much do I invest in my training comes in. So hopefully does that answer your question at all, Geth? Or did I completely miss the point there? Yeah, as I say, there are other platforms out there, but they do have a bit of a stranglehold in the market. I have particular opinions on it as a training platform, but I won't share those just now. So yeah, that's how you build a macro plan. None of it, I imagine, is particularly complicated so far, or pretty commonsensical. I think some with this stuff, generally, it's the main kind of difficulty of building a training plan, and the reason why people like myself can bring values is there's so many different variables to bring into it, and really, you know, it's just you're going to be an expert in whatever job you guys do. If you have a job, you know, you're going to be experts in that. And I guess the way I explain it is it's like asking me to do your job. You know, I think I'm relatively switched on. I reckon I probably have an inkling regardless of what the job is, but you probably wouldn't trust me with the company, would you? And so that's kind of, I think, can be the difference between kind of a homemade plan and getting someone like me involved. But to kind of help you with the kind of homemade plan a little bit more, we get into a bit more granularity. So we start talking about weekly structure, and this is actually where it does get a bit harder to give general advice, because really once you kind of get into the weekly side of things, the focus and the blend of training really depends on the individual, their goals and the training phase, etc. But for a cycling plan, so what I'm going to talk about is a cycling plan. We are fundamentally a triathlon coaching outfit, but I look after some very good cyclists as well. So there is a loose general approach you can follow, and in essence what it comes down to is, as best as you can over the course of the week, you're trying to hit each of your different energy systems. Okay, so that means your anaerobic power and sprints, kind of VO2 max type efforts, threshold or sort of time trialing type efforts, and then balance all of that with, you know, plenty of low intensity training as well. So remember that 80-20 rule. It doesn't have to be applied rigidly to every week, but over the course of a training block or a season, you want that 80-20 kind of ratio to apply. Okay, and how you do this, again, really depends on time availability. So I'm just going to share now training, just 3 weeks I chucked together before coming on. I did this very quickly. Okay, so probably wouldn't necessarily do it exactly like this. And it was actually quite hard to do because when you don't have a frame of reference, you don't have like an event or something, or you don't know anything about the individual, putting 3 weeks of training together is actually really difficult. So I'll just share this with you now. Apologies if you can't see it too well when I flip over. Here we go. the live feed. I'm back. I embarrassed myself there, sorry. So just coming back to, so that's an example training plan. As I say, did that very quickly. A lot more thought would go into that ordinarily, but that's just kind of an example of how you juggle or deal with certain issues, or the plan would ebb and flow, because not every week should be the same in terms of high intensity VO2 set, high intensity sprint set. It needs to ebb and flow, and be more in line, and just taking into account the effect that certain sessions are going to have. You have to kind of take your foot off the gas a bit before you go again, and not all high intensity sets have to be max effort. Okay, it's all about consistency, remember, not perfection. So just come back to Will's question, which is a really good one. How would you adjust if you wanted to do some Zwift races or RGT races? Yeah, you got the team time trials, etc. So that's a really good question. That's actually something that we have to deal with a lot. We try to get our triathletes into e-racing on a weekly basis, because e-racing is so good for that really high-powered stuff that it's hard to make yourself do, particularly if you're a triathlete, on a weekly basis. So we try to get our triathletes to do as much e-racing as they can before they get into their main build towards their race, which they're now, many of them have just started, so they've sort of dropped away from the e-racing now. But to answer the question, how would you adjust? I think you'd adjust in the same way as we talked about there. So if I go back to the plan, you also got to think about the type of race. What areas is it going to hit? So for instance, the Sunday night's VCN World Champs race, that was lots of long high-powered efforts, so sort of very long VO2 max / threshold efforts on the climbs through Dirty Reaver. So there really, that's a VO2 max / threshold session. So then what I would look to do is then cut out some of the VO2 and threshold work in the training plan, if that makes sense. And then on the flip side, if you were doing like a crit style race, that's much more anaerobic. So that's short bursts, recovery, short bursts as you respond or attack, And so in that instance, I'd probably then reduce the amount of anaerobic work that's elsewhere in the plan. And then back onto the question again, the team time trial stuff. So that again, you're looking at probably, depending on who you're racing with. So if you're one of the stronger athletes, you might not be working as hard, but say you're in the middle, you're looking at lots of threshold work in that. So again, I'd then probably reduce the amount of threshold focus work in their plan. So hopefully that makes sense. You basically just need to take stock of the type of race, what sort of efforts are you going to be doing in it, and then just making sure you amend or reduce the equivalent type of training in the rest of the week. Because otherwise, basically, if you do a similar session like the day before or something, you'll just be wrecked for the race, and then likewise, you'll have a crap quality training session the next day trying to do it after a race. It's okay to do every now and then, but particularly if you're in like a big training block or whatever, or a big training week, there's only so many times you're going to get away with it before you get overwhelmed. So really good question that. Thanks, Will. So just How long we got? I've got about 10 minutes. So just a few other key things to remember. I've already mentioned one of them. Our ultimate goal, remember, is consistency, not perfection. So we're not looking to do every single session. So if I looked at 3 weeks and one of my athletes had done every single session perfectly, I'd be alarmed, because they will have sacrificed other stuff in order to do that. Doesn't necessarily mean they haven't done every session, but to complete it perfectly, yeah, that rarely happens. It's great when it does, but shouldn't be every week is completed perfectly, because if it is, either they've compromised other things in their life which they shouldn't have, or they haven't got enough training and they need more. They've got too much time, but it's not stressing them enough. Okay? So when we're saying look to hit the key session, when we say we're looking for consistency, not perfection, it means we're looking to hit the key sessions that align with your goal and hitting them regularly. So it depends on the type of plan you're following or the type of training you're doing. So for a quick racer or an e-racer, you want to make sure you get in those short duration sessions, so those anaerobic sessions, and then balance it with plenty of low intensity riding to keep your base fitness up. Then conversely, for a long course triathlete, that base mileage, that long endurance mileage, that's key, and that's the absolute priority. And then backing it up with some time trial stuff and FTP sessions. And I think also one thing you really want to try and avoid, regardless of whatever you're doing, is if you can't do a session, don't backload your week. There will always be more training. So if you can't do a session, skip it and move on. Okay? I promise you, it won't be long until you're doing another session just like the one you skipped. Okay? Very soon. So don't stress, don't backload your week, because if you kind of pushed everything into Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that's going to overflow into the next week, and you're just going to constantly play and catch up, constantly overly fatigued. Okay? So if it's a key session, swap it. If it swaps easily for a non-key session, then fine, and then you just drop the non-key session. But generally, guys, if you can't do a session, just skip it and move on, because likelihood is the rest of that week is planned quite carefully, and so you don't really want to be kind of messing it up, messing up the blend. So yeah, one thing you should not skip though is your recovery days. These shouldn't be optional. They're the source of improvement. They're where you get stronger. As I've already said, make sure you're realistic with your time availability. It's very easy to get overwhelmed by either choosing an inappropriate event that you cannot realistically train for properly, or by loading up your training plan with all these sessions you want to do and then getting disgruntled when you can't do most of it. So really be realistic with your time availability and choose events that are appropriate for you. It's quite hard as a coach to say to someone, I don't think you're going to be able to do that, but it's very unlikely to be. I don't think you're capable. It's more like, you're a busy professional. You often work until 3 a.m. in the morning. You've got 2 young kids. You like to play a bit of rugby. You like to play tennis or whatever as well. And so really, is signing up for that Ironman, is it worth it? Can you actually have the emotional and physical capacity for it? So yeah, you've got to be super realistic with what you have to offer. Because your training plan ultimately, guys, should work for you. It should guide you, but you shouldn't be a slave to it. Okay, it shouldn't be another layer of stress. Okay, and if you're getting to feel that way, you might want to, just have a little think about it. If you have a coach, talk to your coach. It doesn't necessarily mean dropping it. It might just mean that you need to freshen up a little bit. But yeah, shouldn't be another layer of stress, really. So yeah, that's kind of everything on training plans, guys. What I would like to do, if you'll oblige me for the last few minutes, is just talk about our different coaching relationships. It would be remiss of me to talk about training sessions all long and then not talk about what we have to offer. So our main offering is what we call our squad membership, and this is our fully supervised program with ongoing coach communication and support. Not that you necessarily want to hear from me any more than you already are. We do have other coaches. I can offer that. This is for athletes really who want to learn, and we put a big emphasis on developing them over the long term rather than for just a one-off event. So our squad membership isn't really for people that are just building towards an Ironman and then that's it, they're done. It's more for people that want to evolve over time. But as part of the program, we schedule every single one of the sessions, including building them strength programs, bespoke strength programs. And then to help with kind of this development process, there's a whole bunch of really cool benefits that come with the squad membership. So for instance, we've got exclusive online squad strength workshops, and they also have a Wednesday morning turbo session, much like this, but focus on what they need. We do dynamic screenings, which is to assess their strength, mobility and muscular balance, so then we can build them tailored strength programs. We also do full spectrum performance testing with them, bike testing that is, so it's a step up from your bog standard FTP test, and it's even more horrible. For our triathletes, we have video swim assessments where we film their swim stroke and then kind of give them tailored drills, etc., and a report alongside their kind of marked up footage. We also have just added another really cool benefit, which is exclusive nutritional seminars from our training partners, Total Endurance Nutrition. You'll see their advert going above my head soon. There you go. Oh, I love it when timing works. So those are our training partners. That's a new benefit we've added, and we're super excited about that. And then exclusive access to otherwise paid for resources. So an example of that is our audio swims. Again, straight, there you go. Designed for open water use, and then our cycle seminar library as well, things like that. So that's the squad membership. That's the fully supervised coaching relationship. Then we have our defined duration plans, and now these are still fully tailored plans, but they are for those that are preparing for a one-off event, or for those that perhaps require a bit more independence. They're not super keen on a full coaching relationship, and these plans are largely unsupervised, albeit still fully tailored to the athlete. So their defined duration plans, they're super flexible in their makeup, and you can include whatever you want really. So if you want a pure cycling plan, or you can swim, bike, run and strength if you like. Basically with those we do all the hard work up front, make sure the plan satisfies the athlete's requirements, and then the coach drops away. They're not completely left to their own devices though. We do check in on them periodically, and they can always request an hour's coach consultation for a small fee. Usually that covers things like race strategy or a particular aspect of training. So that's our defined duration plans, and the last thing to mention are our on-demand plans. Now, I've been working really hard on these over the last sort of couple of months, and these are basically where you just pay and play. So these are typically short programs designed for a very specific purpose, and they're not tailored to the individual, they're tailored to the goal. So they're designed to basically bridge the gap between you and your short-term goals, or to demonstrate something about your current fitness levels or your current characteristics as an athlete. So an example of that, the obvious one is our 12-week e-racing plans, which you can actually get for free at the moment if you go to the RGT website. We've got Couch to 5K plans, 12-week FTP builder plans, which might be of interest to those guys on tonight. And then we've got other things like swim technique developer plans as well. So that's us in a nutshell, guys. What time are we on? 30 seconds to spare. So hopefully some stuff to come out of that in terms of looking after your own training there, guys. I'll stick around now, so bear in mind I spent the last 5 minutes sort of plugging, so very happy to stay around for a few minutes if anyone else has got any questions on training plans or any other training related questions. If you've got a question, guys, you can unmute yourself in Zoom. You can use the chat in Zoom. I'm actually for once covering the RGT chat as well, or normally that doesn't work for me. Or if you are joining via the live stream, I have also got the live stream chat, so you can just comment in the live stream. See, I don't speak that language, I'm afraid. Is that Dutch? I don't know. No, Hungarian? Not sure. Yeah, so sorry to whoever just commented in the RGT feed. Yeah. But if anyone else has got any questions, do feel free to ask away. Otherwise, I will leave you to enjoy your evening. So we're on. No worries, cheers, Geoff. No worries, guys. Trying to get out doing the Paterberg. No worries, cheers, Seven. Yes. Yeah, so there's a strength workshop tomorrow evening, guys. So if anyone's not familiar with our live sessions, we do a strength workshop, a free strength workshop. Sign up for that on our website. But yeah, that'll be going ahead tomorrow. I busted my ankle last week, so I couldn't do last week's. And then Wednesday we have our structured workout, Wednesday evening at 6:30 BST. Yeah, so that's what we've got on this week. Nice one, mate. See you soon. Righty-ho then. No one's got any questions, I will dive off. But always feel free to drop us an email, guys, if you think of something subsequently. And likewise, if you think of something that you would like us to cover in these sessions, do feel free to contact us. But yeah, no worries, guys. Have a lovely evening, everyone.